At such moments, I almost always remember my time in the desert. I suppose this is quite reasonable, considering that I am looking at my target through the scope. Only now my goal is not to be a terrorist or even a criminal. In fact, in this case, I am the criminal. My target is a balding, sweaty, slightly overweight banker who at this very moment is plowing the field of one of his subordinates from the bank. Why is he in my sights? Well, because I have a contract to end his life. Someone, and I have no idea who, ordered this man's murder. They paid with cryptocurrency, and everything was organized through the dark net. I will never meet the person who placed the order, and I have no ties to either the target or his lover. By the time law enforcement receives the alarm, I will no longer be there, and I am very careful not to leave any traces that could point to me. I watch through the scope for a while longer. I'm not a voyeur, but I need to find an opportunity to shoot. For various reasons, I can't shoot while they're in, as they say, but usually when a guy is done, he either rolls over on the bed or stands up. As a rule, this is a signal for me. I adjusted my scope a little, looking at the part of the room that I could see through the window. There was no one except the copulating couple. I looked at her. She's a good prize. The contract states that no harm will come to her and she will not suffer. At least physically. I can't predict how watching her lover's head explode as he goes to the bathroom to take a leak will affect her psyche. I looked around for a second. You shouldn't become so focused on a goal that you end up in danger yourself. I have no observer, no cover. It's just me here, so I have to make sure my position is secure. And that's true. I'm on the roof of a building across the street from the hotel where the cheater lives. I return to the scope and see that it is close to completion. I adjust myself again, check that nothing has changed in the conditions, and at this moment he arches his back, shouting out his climax. He shudders once, twice, 3 times, and freezes. Then he gets off her. As expected, he heads to the bathroom. I pull the trigger. I'm gone before she even starts screaming, and by the time law enforcement gets there, I'm already miles away. I put my gear in one of several storage units I have around town, each under a different name and prepaid in cash, before heading home. During the trip, I again reflected on how I ended up here. How did it happen that I am now a killer, specializing almost exclusively in eliminating cheating spouses? Well, when it comes to shooting, everything is simple. I've always been good with a rifle. From an early age hunting on a farm, I developed an affinity for guns, especially rifles, which meant I could make shots that would kill everyone else. It's almost instinctive. When I enlisted in the Marines and then in sniper school, we were taught all kinds of trajectories, wind resistance, ballistics, and other sciences. I learned all this, but I just didn't need it. I can make a shot by eye that many snipers cannot do even with all their calculations and computers. It is simply a natural instinctive ability. There is no doubt that I would have achieved great success in the Marine Corps. But then something happened that changed my life forever and is the reason I began to specialize in cheating spouses. You already guessed it, cheating spouse. Gabrielle is a girl of French origin, a petite, dark-haired woman whom we met in a bar in the city while on vacation. She is lively and attractive, and her body evokes all sorts of unclean thoughts. She spent the entire evening with us, and my best friend Bobby and I took turns dancing with her. By the end of the evening, it was obvious that there was something between her and Bobby, and with a bitter smile, I did the only thing a best friend could do. I wished him luck and returned to base alone. After that, every time they went to the city, they were inseparable. I would either start the evening as a third wheel, trying to find my own company as the evening progressed, or sometimes she would bring a friend to keep me company while she and Bobby had fun with each other. I was surprised when, after 3 months of dating, Bobby came to me to show me the ring he had bought for her. "Wow, Bobby," I said, "that's a rock. Are you sure you're ready for this?" He chuckled. "When you know," he said, taking the pose of an old sage. "I won't let her leave." The look she gave when Bobby got down on one knee at the bar that night gave me pause. I expected her to be excited and happy, but a look of calculation flashed across her face before she showed the expected emotions. I didn't say anything to Bobby because I didn't want to ruin his moment. but I was curious. I organized the bachelor party as I was best man, and although those are my words, it was epic. All the ingredients were there. All three components were present. Friends, half the platoon was locked in. Alcohol. We had to put Bobby back in his bunk that evening, and he remembered almost nothing about what happened there. And the girls. Of course, there were also dancers. It is necessary. However, I tried to protect Bobby's virtue and saw to it that nothing untoward happened to him. When I organized the party, I talked to Gabrielle beforehand to find out her boundaries. If she had said no dancers, there wouldn't have been any. I didn't want Bobby to get divorced before we got married. The wedding was small. Her parents, a few of her friends, and a few guys from our platoon. I was, as I already said, the best man. 2 months later, we were again sent to the desert for 3 months of service. I will remember that patrol for the rest of my life. We were instructed to search a village where, according to our information, the rebels could be located. My spotter and I had already scouted and found a place where I could provide surveillance for the guys. The situation wasn't ideal, as I still couldn't see some places. But this was the best option. Bobby had been out of sorts all day, seemed overly anxious to get there, and was abrupt with everyone, even me, which was unusual. When I asked him what the problem was, he just grinned and said he was just itching to get going. Bobby never returned from that patrol. I didn't see what happened since his position was out of sight from my vantage point, but his team said that when they made contact with the enemy, Bobby stood up, shouted something like, "Go, you bastards!" and rushed towards them, firing from the hip with his M16 like some gangster James Cagney. He didn't even run 3 meters. As his best friend, I was tasked with collecting his things to send to the USA, and that's when I found the letter. Dear Bobby, I know this is the coward's way, but I need to tell you that I dated someone else, and we fell in love. I'm leaving you so that he and I can be together. I want you to know that I really loved you, but the time spent apart showed that I am not truly in love with you, and you deserve more. So it will be better if we break up, and you can find someone who will love you as much as you deserve. Please don't think too badly of me. John says you still have a month left on tour, so by the time you get back, I'll be moving out of our house. I'm not going to demand anything from you during the divorce, and I will be glad to consider you a friend if you find the strength in your heart to forgive me. Best wishes, Gabriel. Damn bitch, I shouted after reading the letter. Now I understood Bobby's behavior and decided that retribution must come. I was tasked with escorting Bobby's body back to the US, which interrupted my tour. We unloaded the coffin and Gabrielle came up to him, tears streaming down her face. She put her hand on the coffin and I said, "Don't you dare! You betrayed him." She stepped back, stunned, and then I noticed the officer accompanying her, Colonel John Edwards. "What the heck?" he began, hugging her shoulders. "How dare you?" "How dare I said. "This treacherous woman planted a Dear John letter on an active duty soldier right before a patrol. What did she think would happen when I find out who this worthless scum she's with?" "Stand by, Marine," Colonel Edwards growled. "I didn't know she sent him a letter. I told her to wait and we—" "You?" I asked incredulously. "Have you met the wife of one of your subordinates?" "It's just—" he began. My first blow hit him in the throat, bringing him to his knees. A kick to the groin knocked him to the ground, and I kicked him 4 more times in the face while he was on the ground before the cops got to me. My greatest satisfaction was that we were both sentenced to court-martial. Him for inappropriate behavior, and me for hitting a senior in rank. I spent a year in military prison for assault, after which I was dishonorably discharged, and he was simply kicked out of the service, deprived of his pension. It took me another year to find her. She had moved to Canada and was living with a French-Canadian businessman. I had no idea what happened to Colonel Edwards. He got lost along the way. I thought about just shooting her from a distance. It's so simple. No security, no surveillance, a simple woman in public, like catching fish in a barrel. But then she would never know what killed her and why. I needed it to be more personal. I needed her to understand who killed her and why. She made everything easy for me in the end. She was at a dance with her friends. Apparently, she was still cheating because the guy who was currently running his tongue down her throat was not her French-Canadian businessman. I watched from the bar as he whispered something in her ear. She nodded, and they moved towards the exit. I walked out the front door and walked around the bar. I guessed where they were going and was not disappointed when I saw that they were heading towards the SUV in the parking lot. I waited by my car to see if they were going to go somewhere, but when he opened the back door of the SUV, I knew it was going to be here and now. Looking around to see if there was anyone watching, I moved closer until I saw Gabrielle, or rather Gabrielle's ass, sticking out the back door and the guy behind her. I didn't want to kill the guy, I have no claims against him, so I quickly strangled him and he fell unconscious on the floor. It took Gabrielle a few seconds to realize that the shaking had stopped. She climbed out of the car and turned to face me, looking down the barrel of my Glock 9. Her eyes widened as she recognized me and she opened her mouth to speak. I got ahead of her. "Bobby says hi, bitch." I pulled the trigger twice, putting 2 bullets in her chest, and she was thrown back into the car. I disappeared before the gunshots reached the bar and was back across the border into the United States less than 4 hours later. Revenge for Bobby gave me an idea. Surely there are a number of people who are being cheated on at this moment. Some of them will want to reconcile, others will want to divorce. But there will be those who want to find a more permanent solution to the problem of a cheating spouse, and I have all the necessary skills to make it happen. And so I became a hitman, specifically one who attacks those outside the confines of their marriage. This is an easy job. In general, these are ordinary people. They practically do not know that they are a target and have no personal protection. I had been practicing my craft for about 4 years and was making quite a lot of money when I met Juliana. Juliana is the finance manager at the car dealership I visited when I wanted to buy a new car. She is a bright, smart, and interesting conversationalist. It didn't hurt that she was almost 5 feet tall in heels, with legs that went on for miles, long jet black hair, and an ass to die for. We instantly hit it off, and within half an hour she agreed to go on a date with me. I won't bore you with the courtship dances, but suffice it to say that a year and a half later, Juliana and I were married in a big wedding with over 200 guests, consisting of her friends and family, my parents, and a few of my old sailing buddies still in touch with me. To the world and to Juliana, I was a successful financial manager, managing money, spending most of my working time on a computer at home, but regularly traveling around the country when necessary. This is the perfect cover for my real job. Life with Juliana was good. She supported my money management work even when I had to travel on business. She always welcomed my return with bedroom sessions where she was wild and uninhibited. Even when I was at home, we had sex at least 4 to 5 times a week, and sometimes much more often. She never went with the girls, although she had many friends. We always went together. If we went to a dance, she accepted, with my blessing, invitations to dance from other men, but always ensured that their behavior, like hers, met her husband's requirements. I never doubted that she loved me, just as I loved her. The contracts came through the dark web, and accepting them made me paranoid. Never met in person, dealt only online, required irrefutable proof of infidelity, and they never knew when or where the contract would be executed. The money was transferred to a virtual account with a ban and was released only after the contract was completed. The money could be returned by me to the client if for some reason I could not fulfill the contract, but so far this has not happened. Since I had no connections to any of the victims, law enforcement never approached me. And since I used cryptocurrency, even if it could be proven that the person who entered into the contract paid the lump sum, its whereabouts were completely unknown. Security. I have killed far more men than women, by a ratio of about 10 to 1. When a man cheats on a woman, she wants him dead. And when a woman cheats on a man, he most often wishes for the death of the person she cheated on him with. Of course, there were exceptions. but I have no conscience. This is work. People are willing to pay me, and pay me well, for my services. And cheaters deserve everything they get. So life went on. After 3 years of marriage, Juliana and I had our first child, followed by our second, just 18 months later. They grew up in a good, stable family and are now both attending fully paid college. Juliana was feeling a bit of an empty nest and returned to work at the car dealership. I worked from home most of the day, with occasional trips. I decided that I would retire. 1 or 2 more contracts will complete the pension fund I've been building, and frankly, I'm tired of the game. I looked at the job board I used to look for work and saw that there were 2 available contracts. One is in a neighboring state, and the other is on the other side of the country. I decided that paying out a local contract would get me out of the business, and I clicked on the jobs to begin the process of getting a contract. The target was a man named Peter Miller. Attached is a photograph. The file states that he is a salesman for group insurance that covers 3 states, including ours, and that he travels extensively throughout his area. He is married to Janine, and they have 3 young children, Paul, Mary, and Siobhan. I have private investigator reports showing him having affairs with 4 different women. He is currently on the road, and his route has brought him within 50 miles of where I live. He is going to stay at a hotel for a week. There is no information that he has a woman, but it is assumed that he has one and that they will date during his stay. The contract provides for surveillance of his hotel, and if he appears with a woman who is not his wife, then to monitor him constantly. Attached to the contract were photographs of the man himself, his wife, and 3 children. I always wonder why photographs of children are included, but they are always included. Whoever compiled the dossier did a good job. It was known not only which hotel he was staying at, but also which room. I Googled the hotel and found that the room he booked was on the 5th floor on the east side. A quick glance at Google Earth showed that, although not just down the block, there was construction going on just down the block. If I can get to a high enough floor of this unfinished building, I will have an unobstructed view of the east side of the hotel, since the buildings directly opposite the hotel are only 3 stories high. I have to go on a business trip next week, I told Juliana on Friday evening. I will leave on Monday morning and return on Thursday. Perhaps Friday. She looked up from the book she was reading. I thought you were done with them already, she said. Without complaining, I just asked. This could be the last, depending on how things go. Maybe there will be another one if this one doesn't live up to expectations. She nodded, then grinned. That means we'll have the whole weekend together, she said. We didn't spend the whole weekend in bed. After a fabulous Friday night, we went out on Saturday, did a few mundane things, and then had dinner at our favorite restaurant. We spent Saturday evening and most of Sunday in bed. On Monday morning, I left the house and drove to the airport by car. After parking, I walked about a mile to a nearby warehouse and climbed into an inconspicuous car that I kept there for this purpose. This is a gray Toyota sedan that is immediately forgettable. She registered on a fake ID, which was strong enough to pass police checks, but wouldn't stand up to much scrutiny. I was in position on the 7th floor of a construction site, aiming at his window when the target entered the room. He fumbled for a few minutes and then picked up the phone, obviously making a call. After a short conversation, he left the room. It was a little after 12 o'clock in the afternoon. I did not pursue him. I knew that he would return, and I settled down to wait. For some reason, the construction site was closed, so I was not afraid of being discovered. When he returned to his room, it was already after 6 in the evening. In an obvious haste, he went to the bathroom to take a shower. I watched him as he walked back to the bedroom, nothing out of the ordinary. The water in the shower must have been cold because there wasn't much visible between his legs, and his body, although thin, wasn't particularly inspiring. I often wondered what attracted women to such men, and decided that he must have a good tongue in chat because it was definitely not his physical characteristics. After another 30 minutes, he got dressed and left. I ate and sat down to wait for his return. I was sure that he would return, and probably with some woman. I'll take a photo to prove his infidelity, and then I'll put a bullet in his skull. The contract doesn't say anything about killing or sparing the woman, so I won't kill her. Although I don't mind killing cheaters, I didn't know that this woman was a cheater. Maybe she's just a lonely girl who fell for this idiot. I have no information and she will remain alive. It was already past midnight when the lights in the room finally came on again, and I looked through the scope again. I saw my target enter the room with a tall, dark-haired woman. As soon as they walked through the door, the woman pinned him against the door and fell to her knees in front of him. I couldn't see what exactly was going on since her back was to me, and I could see him from the torso down due to my position a couple of floors above them, but I wasn't worried. Eventually, they will move further into the room. Still locked together, they began to remove the remains of their clothes, moving towards the bed. When they reached the bed, she was left in her underwear and he was naked. He pushed her back onto the bed and started kissing her body. From this angle, I could only see the tops of both of them, but then she tilted her head back and I moved my aim to look at her face. At that moment, it took all my self-control not to pull the trigger. Instead, I clicked on the camera that was linked to my scope and took a digital photo. Over the next 3 hours, I took photos and videos of the couple as they had sex in the bedroom. They even did this by the window, with the blinds open and the lights on, so they could easily be seen from the street, but they didn't seem to care. Finally, having had their fill, they went to bed for one last session of lovemaking before falling asleep for the night. When the lights went out, I sat back in my chair, my heart pounding and my thoughts racing. I opened the photo on my phone that I had taken first through the scope and looked at it. The woman arched her back, her eyes wide open. I zoomed in on that face, looking into those eyes, those beautiful eyes, the eyes of my wife, Juliana. Thoughts were racing through my head. I couldn't complete the murder right now. One of the safest things about what I did was that I was not involved with the victims or their partners. If I kill one or both of them now, the first person the police want to talk to will be me. My alibi won't stand up to that scrutiny. Besides, I'm not in a position to decide what to do with Juliana. Now I am so angry that I could have put a bullet in her without thinking. But I knew that the anger would pass, and I need to think not only about myself, but also about my children. I have to think long and hard about what to do with her. I will have to live with my decision for the rest of my life. Another thought was that if I returned the contract, someone else might pick it up and be less picky about whether or not to kill the asshole's partner. I also had to think about whether this was a setup. Did someone set it up for me to see my wife cheating with this idiot to try and screw me over? I didn't think it was law enforcement. They wouldn't put any of them on my radar because, for all they know, I could shoot tonight. But there might be someone else involved. Maybe someone then connected to one of my previous contracts who wants revenge. No, I need to fulfill this contract, but make it look random or natural. No follow-up from the police so we don't get hurt. I'll deal with Juliana later. I collected all my things and took them to the storage room. I won't use them for this job. While I was in storage, I picked up a few extra electronic items, and when I returned to the hotel, I found both of their cars and installed a GPS tracker on them. The next morning, after they both left, Juliana returned to my house, and he went to do what he was supposed to do here. I entered the hotel and, using the electronic keycard, entered his room. I searched the room, finding nothing unexpected. In his luggage were several blood pressure medications and some Viagra. Then I installed several hidden cameras. I have 4 days to complete the contract. Since I told Juliana I wouldn't be back until Thursday or Friday, I didn't need to communicate with her too much, although I knew she would call me today. I also booked a hotel room using my fake ID. Everything will be easier if I stay in the hotel legally. I looked around and found that surveillance cameras were installed only at the entrance and in the elevators. There are none on the stairs or in the corridors near the rooms. During the day, I watched their movements while making my preparations. Juliana was at work, then went to the gym, then returned home. After a while, his tracker showed that he was heading towards my house, and I swore to myself that if she let this asshole into my house, I would kill them both on principle and not care about the consequences. Luckily, He didn't come within 5 blocks of my house. Just after 6 in the evening, Juliana called me. "Hey, baby," she said. "Hi, honey. I missed you last night. I thought you'd call." "Sorry, I fell asleep in front of the TV, and when I woke up, it was already late," she said without the slightest pause. "I thought so. That's why I didn't bother you," I said, clenching my fist. This was the first time Juliana lied to me. Obviously, there were others, but I just didn't know about them. "How are things going with your meeting?" she asked. "An unexpected complication has arisen,"